All right, hard yarners. Bloody incredible episode. I'd say one of the more important episodes we've had in a very long time. Very important that a lot of people listen to this episode. A lot of information that I wasn't across and was very eye-opening. But before we get into what we spoke about and our guest, today's episode is brought to you by alltradescover.com.au. If you're watching at home, you'll see behind our wonderful guest there. And we love that they're a part of this program. They've been with us, for the last 2.5 years. John, their owner, CEO, I think CEO, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the owner, he's an absolute legend, gets around the little guy. So all trades cover. If you've got a small business in regards to trades, they're really going to specialise in covering you for your liability or accidents on site. So please get around them and drop our name because it helps us. And hopefully we can get a little bit more money from them next year. That'll be good, eh, John? So, not that we don't appreciate what you're giving us. Also, this week's episode is brought to you by Feed. Feed is an animal-based supplement. We've got oyster, we've got beef. I think it's a beef liver. We've got organ complex. We've got oysters, we've got honey, collagen. So all of the supplements, they're all animal-based, so the bioavailability of it is incredible. And definitely worth getting involved. Use the code word HARDYARN and you'll get, I think, 15% off maybe. I'm really not across these things. I probably should be more across how much percentage off, but it's about 15 or 10% off. So thanks so much to Feed. And finally, this week's episode is brought to you by Goat Tape. Do you actually, would you consider wearing anything like that?
Oh, wear anything.
Like it helps with the breath. Like, are you a snorer?
Not that I've been aware of.
Okay, well, I'm a
not
bit
that
of a
I've
snorer.
listened to myself. I could be. I don't.
It definitely helps with the snoring and it improves your breathing up to 35%, the oxygen intake. So definitely use it through the night. It helps you, aids with your recovery, helps with your snoring. And the mouth tape, fuck, what a difference that has made. That has been revolutionary.
Well, it'd treat apnea, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, it definitely stops the snoring completely. That just that's completely gone. And I got whiskers and stuff, and it sticks on no problem. So get around the mouth tape, and you're going to feel a shite load better in the morning when you wake up. But incredible episode. Thank you to all of those sponsors. Hard yarn, code word. But our guest, introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what we spoke about today.
My name is Rodney Norman Culleton. I go by my full name. And I'm a former federal senator for the Federal Parliament for Western Australia. Primary producer, been in agriculture, country boy. Always been a country boy, would never remove myself as a country boy, and because those values are just something that I'm very blessed to have been a part of, and my upbringing, and I'm just out doing my job and running the Great Australian Party and sharing the information and knowledge I knew at the top end of town while I was a federal senator.
Mate, we covered a lot. We spoke about the farm, a lot about farming. We spoke a lot about the constitutional side of things, the laws, the privileges, the rights of Australians. Anything else? Do we remember? Oh, it's a lot.
Well, it's more about just how we need to be seen to make a difference. And like I said to you, if you're going to protest and go down the Kwinana Freeway, you don't want to disrupt people over the keep shipping sheep, because going down the freeway, it makes no it makes no impact on the industry, and I'll tell you why, because it's not a state issue. If you're going to protest, then every state has to protest together going down the highway. This is a Commonwealth issue. People need to understand how that message can get through, and that's why I'm out there just giving people the knowledge that the law has taught me while I was in Parliament. So,
mate, that's just a little insight of the sort of information you're going to get today. You might want to get a notebook out, listeners, because there's a lot of information. And thanks so much for wearing the Ocean Heroes.
Very proud.
Ocean Heroes, surfing on the spectrum. We had their fundraiser last week, 24 hours, we swam 4 teams. There was 400 swimmers. We raised $200,000 for helping kids learn how to surf with autism and on the spectrum.
Fantastic.
So what an organisation they are. So congratulations to everyone who was part of that. And without further ado, thank you very much, sir. Let's get hard.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Jelby.
And Cameron Branch.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
I was putting the headphones on and they fucking clipped and smacked me in the fucking head. So classic. But mate, welcome. Thank you very much. Good to have you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
No, it's good. Pretty excited about sort of chatting about a few things that I've been told you're across. But before we get into a few things, maybe give the listeners at home that don't know who you are, who you represent, and who you are.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm pretty good at that at the moment because I've just come out with a documentary that'll be released in a couple of days, and those very same questions have asked. But look, I'm a country boy, born and bred in the upper Great Southern of Western Australia. Pardon me, and I have been farming for a number of years, and I've also done a stint as a former federal senator for Western Australia. That was a very interesting time, and since then I have gone on to create the Great Australian Party. Great Australian Party represents the core values of what our forefathers fought for, and certainly, bringing back the rights to people and not so much trying to be run by some administration that only gives you privileges. And that's really important because Great Australian Party is basically going out and teaching the people the history, and as a former federal senator, to be a good senator and to make sure that all laws, because I am the lawmaker at the end of the day, that whatever comes up from the House of Representatives, from the lower house, I have to apply to our founding deed, our law, before it can actually go down and become law. And it's really what I learnt while I was a senator was to really study the history of our country. And the ethos of Great Australian Party is to go out to the people at whole and basically teach them the history of our country. Because if you don't know the history of your country, you don't know what your rights are. And if you don't know what your rights are, you would never know if someone's taking them away from you.
Yeah.
So that's the ethos of that Great Australian Party. And of course, we're running again in this 2025 federal election.
What sort of history are you referring to? Like, are we talking ancient, like in regards to Indigenous history, or the history of our country and settlers?
The history in how our founding law is created. So, it's like if I was, a government overseas and I wanted to do business with Australia, the first thing I would look at is the founding deed, which is a constitution. It's no different to a company. A company has a constitution.
Yeah.
And that constitution obviously has foreign and trade and so forth, how you would do business lawfully with Australia. So that is the founding deed. And in essence, in us to actually call ourselves Australian, we have to understand that we have a law that makes us Australian. And it is the founding deed, it is the title deed that allows us to live here in a democracy. And it's the founding document that runs this country. And if the Australian people don't have due diligence, put too much trust into certain people or parties that they put their power of attorney in, essentially when they go to vote, those people can run away with your country, and that is what's been happening. So it's more about, a constitutional correction And, my efforts since being in Parliament have really rattled the cage. And that hasn't only just come from the media, but certainly come from the Prime Minister of the day, which was Malcolm Turnbull. And look, I know a lot of them, and I've worked with them. So, but that's the constitutional role of a federal senator. It's to uphold the laws of this great nation and to make sure that this nation runs on the right railway track. And currently, at the moment, it's down the different one. So
it's and potentially you have a better insight, but it seems from the outside that we're just loyal to the resource industry at this stage, and not the people. We're not prioritising the people that live here. And as far as I'm aware, I think that the number one income earner for Australia is the people and the tax that they pay, whereas the corporate tax, and I could be wrong from that, but corporate taxes, mining taxes and stuff aren't making up the same amount that the people are paying, that seems a bit interesting considering how much money our resource industry makes.
Well, there has been a lot of focus on extractable industries. There's no question about that. Mining is a big part, but so is agriculture. Australia has the best agriculture industry in the world. We have the beautiful climate, the quality of our grain being a primary producer. A lot of countries actually buy our produce to blend so they can meet world standards in selling their products.
Really?
So absolutely. There's no question about that because, I put a stint. I was with the Australian Wheat Board, but what I've witnessed, and this is not a conspiracy theory. Australia is very attractive to the rest of the world. It's got great extractable resources. It's got great primary industries, just reiterating what I've just said. But what the Australian people need to understand that the law of this country, because we all own the country, and this is no disrespect to the First Nation people, because I've done a lot of memorandum of understanding with the actual tribal elders around this country. I've travelled right up through the Kimberley and so forth, and I've actually sat around their law councils. So I've really got myself involved with the First Nation people. And they're prepared to walk side by side. They want to put the differences aside because they can see collectively as all, we are losing this great nation. And the problem is the people go to vote the majors in, and the majors are not giving us the return of our royalties. So, in effect, if you look at the law of this great nation, no Australian should be struggling. There should be no homeless people because we are the benefactors or the beneficiaries, so we're entitled to get a dividend from the royalties that come from our resources. And what is happening is this government is allowing overseas companies to come in, take our gas for nothing and all of that, not giving anything, but when they need something and support, they're taking it off the taxpayer. So that's a failure with the Senate, and that's where
that feels intentional. That feels like
absolutely
by design.
Because look, it's a fact. If I walk down the street, and I've done this with a live stream, and just rock up to someone and said, "Look, just can I ask you a pertinent question?" They go, "Oh, yeah, okay. What do you think about politicians?" And then all of a sudden, you got a duck. There's a couple of quick jabs come out, and they all say that they're just liars, cheats. I can't stand them. And then you go, "Well, then why do you vote for them?" Well, good question. Why well, there's no one else to vote for. That's not a good question. That's like saying, "Well, I'm only just doing my job."
Yeah, I've never understood. Actually, no, I do understand why, because I was in the camp of, I'll vote Labor if I don't think Liberal's doing the good job, and I'll vote Liberal if I don't think Labor. When I was younger, probably a lot more inexperienced, and also thinking if I voted for someone else, it's a waste. So I've now been since educated in that wrong thought process that voting for a lesser party, a minor party, or an independent is very important, especially when it comes to bills crossing and getting passed. And we see with the misinformation bill, perfect example. If it wasn't for the independents voting no, that would not have got across. So that would have been passed. So it is important. But I don't understand now with that knowledge, and people can start to see it. It's been spread around widely that it isn't a waste. I guess we can see it starting to take place because I think it was last election, it was a 30% winning. They won with 30% of the vote, I think it was. Labor in WA, or maybe it was the National. In WA. I think they won with 30%, that means a lot of people are starting to vote independents and minor parties, but still 30% of people are thinking it's a waste of a vote if you vote for the other for the minor parties.
Well, I mean, everyone has a right to have an opinion on how they want to vote. But if I could just say to your audience, if we could look at it like this, the major parties is like sleeping on the old wire bed. You know, it's just that old steel frame, mesh wire. It's very uncomfortable. But, people today sleep on a very modern mattress with independent coils. And those independent coils is what we need in Parliament because it's like an independent suspension. We've gone out of, look, I've driven a lot of heavy vehicles in my life. I've owned a logistics company myself off the farm. We don't run on the old camelback suspension where you feel like you're at the local rodeo riding a Bronco. But, pardon me, we have airbag suspensions on our trailers and all that now. So we've moved on, and this is what we have to do in politics, get out of the old system where we just keep coming back to this old drone of Albanese and Dutton. That's, it's the same racehorse. Well, it's not actually a racehorse. It's the donkey running in the Melbourne Cup, and yet people go and put a bet on it.
Yeah, definitely. And from what I can see, obviously it's I can't recall who said it. I think it was either Malcolm Roberts. I think it was Malcolm Roberts. It's two sides of the same arsehole. Like it's
well, it's like a third nostril that no one really wants. So.
Yeah, it is seeming to be that way. But having these independents, minor parties in there, it creates a discernment across some of these things that are trying to be passed. I think, what is it in WA at the moment? Is it? It's changed. I know it was 53 of the 59 seats or something. People
have to understand, you also got to watch out who, they can be wolves in sheep's clothing too. The majors can put them in there to try and, you got to look at the preferences. And I don't agree with preferences. I believe if you come in to vote, who you put your vote for is a primary vote and that's it. However, they've got this system but let's just look at the current West Australian election.
Yeah.
Okay, so the company that was counting the votes or had donated to the Labor Party. So straight away it's compromised, and they're telling the commissioner to stand down because they didn't have enough ballot papers. People were denied their right to vote. Now that creates a default, because that's a stain on democracy, because you have to have the whole role of a commissioner is to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote. It's done lawfully and it's done correctly. I'm not so sure about taking the counting system overseas. I mean, it should be done domestically. There's no question about that. But so how it works is...
Yeah, that seems to be a massive conflict of interest.
Well, so what happens is... people have to understand that there is no parliament. So the parliament is prorogued at the end of the period. So once the writs go out, it's prorogued, meaning the old parliament's finished. The people have the power to create a new parliament. That is the whole reason why people have to vote, because they are the battery to the mobile phone. The mobile phone can't operate until the power of attorney goes through the ballot box from the people to vote on who they want to have to represent them. That's why we have a House of Representatives, because they represent the people. Unfortunately, they don't defend the people, but they represent the people. And what if people look at the offer, because you've got to remember law. Let's have a look at law in general. And I learnt this as a federal senator. Law is jurisdictional, right? How do we come up with law? Well, there's three jurisdictions: land, air, which is God's law; land, which is common law; and water, which is commerce. That's law. That spells law. So they are your three jurisdictions. That's why your cricket's based on it, three stumps, the whole lot. You got to look at through the eyes of the law. You shall be known through your actions. And if the people are deceived, like if you see someone on, I don't know, what are those programs? Current Affair, Today, Tonight, where a pensioner has been conned. She's gone and paid a heap of money, but then when you get the lawyer says, well, look, it's not good, but unfortunately, they put the but word in there, but unfortunately, she has no remedy, she's lost her money. And if you look at how this administrative system is presenting their offer to the Australian voter, their offer is in all caps, which means that is, when they put their name, that is not how they write their name. So when you go to court, if you are a business, you have to put it's got to have the ABN number and so forth. And they are making an offer as a business, because if you look up at the major parties, a Great Australian Party is an unincorporated party, okay? It doesn't have an Australian company number. When you look at the Liberal, Labor and all these big ones, they've got Australian company numbers. So in actual fact, they're working for a corporation. So it's up to the people before they put the power of attorney into the vote to say, well, hang on a minute, is that person who's putting their name on a call flute in all caps, is that actually how they write their name? Well, no. And they're setting the jurisdiction of commerce when we should actually be coming back under common law. So we set the jurisdiction. Now, the law offers no remedy for someone that's ignorant. And this is the whole point. And this is why we operate in Canberra with a Parliament House that's up the hill, and our true Commonwealth Parliament is the one down the hill. And that's why the one up the hill only gives you the best of privileges, where the one down the hill is what gives you your rights. So it's up to the Australian people to set what jurisdiction they want to do at the ballot box. So without getting too confusing, but that's where it is. And I, as a senator, had picked this up. I changed the High Court. I put people back onto their properties. I've been doing great work because I've been applying the law at the legislature level, because you can't change that. That's set up there. That's set in stone. Whereas underneath, where your judiciary is, if the people aren't putting the right jurisdiction in, you don't. These things are sort of happening, but we're actually teaching the whole system of what's going on, and we're getting great results. So
what was happening with these titles?
Well, everyone knows that our protection in this whole country is through Christian values, which is the crown. Okay, and without going too deep, there's only one crown. It's called a indivisible crown. And what you can't do is make it divisible. So you can't split it up. There's only, and when you go back to the Transfer of Land Act of 1893, where people's land was held in fee simple, meant that they had full protection under the Crown. Now, when you got full protection under the Crown, in comes the Transfer of Land Act, which is what I've just said. I think it's section 58 or 63 off memory, is what they call indefeasible title. Indefeasible title protects that owner, so anyone that has a house or a property that they're working for with their family to bring it, indefeasible rights protect that property owner of any other third-party claim against that property, unless they have legally registered their interest on your title. So if you had a mortgage with a bank, the bank would then register its legal interest on the title, and if you didn't perform under your contract with your mortgage repayments or whatever, yes, that bank then can come in under the Transfer of Land Act, issue a default, go for a power of sale, which is awarded under the Transfer of Land Act, and then obviously transfer it, and you've unfortunately kicked out, right? And we tried to stop that because in what we need to do now is when the government starts to interfere, like the COVID lockdown and protecting businesses and all that, because it's pretty much they've kneecapped the Australian. He's running around in the last furlong. They've smacked him over the kneecap and he can't finish the race. What we're saying is there has to be forbearance. The government cannot just put these restrictions on people and then financially affect them, because then that, it causes a lot of, a lot of disruption in the family unit. And, you just can't do that because the government's there to protect the people. So, it has to make sure that there's cushioning and forbearance and whatever, so these people can, ride the storm. They're happy to help, but don't leave them, don't kneecap them and then try and let the crows peck their eyes out. So, so that's so as far as the title system goes, it's what we call form and substance. So, what they're trying to do is take the Australian people away from their property rights, which they can't do, okay? So effectively they're going to digital title. That is a big no-no, because if I came through someone's front gate and said, I'm going to make a claim on your property, and they go, no, we're the owner, and they go, prove it, and you have only a digital title, well, that could be erased from the electronic system. There is nothing there, and that is not what we call form. So, that is what we call form. Get it right. That is form. What we have and what you can't get away from is substance. So, what people have to realise is that the Landgate, which used to be DOLA, Department of Land Administration, it's had all these changes, and people need to understand that what's his name, Mark McGowan, sold Landgate, or the registry system of Landgate, for 1.4 million without asking the people of Western Australia to pay the victims of the sex crimes by the Catholic Church. I mean, that was all in the media, and the West Australian people sit back and go, okay.
Well, what can we do about that?
Well, to me, that's an unlawful sale, because he hasn't asked the people of Australia. So all of a sudden, we're now getting all these different name changes. And effectively, what we have to do is say no. And I've gone down to Landgate, and I've actually got them to give us back our historical titles.
And just to go back on that, why is the state paying off the victims of Catholic Church sex crimes? Absolutely.
And look, I ask your listeners to go on, Google it.
Yeah.
Mark McGowan sells sells our title system for 1.4 billion. It's all and he had no right to do that. But in doing that, he's now taken a further step. It's like a rugby game. They keep pushing, and the people are not pushing back. Whereas we're starting to push back now. When I went to Landgate and they refused to hand over our titles, and this is what I'm going to say, Landgate are only the custodians. So they don't own your title. There's 3 copies, one for the registry, one for the bank that may have a mortgage, and one for you. One for archives, one to be held on record, and one for you. Now, the one that's held on for you, if you've got a mortgage, goes to the bank. But the bank, when people are paying off their properties and they want their original title, not record of title, get it right, because they put these different words in to make it different. They weren't letting them go. And I went down and actually spoke to the Register of Titles and said, if you don't give these people back their property, they're going to walk out of Landgate, go down to the police, lodge a criminal complaint for permanently depriving. And they opened up the vault and allowed all people to get back their correct certificate of title, the one that created the folio and volume number right at day dot. That's what you have to get. And when you get that, you have the protection of the Crown, which is all under the laws of Western Australia, and no one can come and take your property, because if you weren't protected by indefeasibility under the Crown at law, then you could never have anyone for trespass. If I went on to your property and you said, I don't want you here, because everyone has a right to go to the door, everyone has a right to go through the front gate to the door, knock, knock, knock. They have a right. You can't be done for trespass unless you tell that person who's knocking at the door to leave. And if they don't leave, bang, he's trespassing.
Yeah.
Now, if you didn't have that protection of indefeasibility, then you couldn't make a complaint against anyone for trespassing. But we are being deprived, no question, of our property rights. And what we've done, in my knowledge as a federal senator, and knowing the legislative laws are coming in through the High Court of Parliament, because Parliament is a court. It's the highest jurisdiction in the land. In actual fact, in the federal parliament of the Commonwealth, we sit higher than the High Court because the people have elected us there, because they are the power to create everything. Whereas a Chief Justice of the High Court is chosen by the government of the day to do its bidding.
Okay.
So when we're coming in under that law, we're just kicking them out. And what we're doing is now the West Australian Police are finding that they have made serious errors. They've interfered with civil proceedings when they can't. They can only do anything in criminal. They can't step into civil. They can't get involved in property disputes when that property owner at the time that they turn up is the legal owner of the property, because he's protected by indefeasibility. And of course, all these general acceptance and so-called truisms or such advice that they may be getting from higher ranking sergeants, and what the WA police have been taught, they don't have to take an instruction from a higher ranking official, parliamentarian or whatever. They hold their own office as a police officer. They take a contract through an oath or an affirmation. That's how that is the key that puts them into the office of law. And then they, as a constable, have to make sure that they at all times are holding up the law. And a lot of them are just saying, well, we're just acting on the advice of the Premier. Well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
He's in violation of his derelict of his duties.
So, I mean, I don't want to brush over the McGowan thing. We can come back to that, because that's quite shocking to me. But
well, it's the truth. So wait till people start to Google it. They'll just be blown away.
Well, actually, before we continue on with what that, we will brush. Otherwise, I'll forget. So, like, what can we do? Like, what can be done? Is there something legally that can be done? And can someone be held accountable? And I'm just shocked. Why is the state paying for Catholic Church sex crimes? I don't.
Well, I suppose people have to understand and ring up Mark McGowan why he's done it, and or Roger Cook why this happened. I mean, that's a significant amount of money to just be, and now we've basically lost our registry system.
So because obviously there's two things wrong with that. They've sold that without the permission of the people, and then they've also, for whatever reason, used that to pay off what could considered to be the Catholic Church's own issue that they should be paying for, which is, I find that quite strange. But yeah, maybe we can do some more digging into that.
Well, why don't we explain it like this? We own, as the Australian people under law, we own all the infrastructure, do we not?
I don't know.
Well, does the taxpayer own that power pole out there?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Okay, so we own the infrastructure. Do we own our ports?
On that principle, yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, so what happens is the government, that's our asset. The government are only in there to be the oversight of our asset, right?
Yeah, they're hired by us.
That's right. Yeah. So let's say Horizon Power is down in Esperance. We've got Western Power in Perth and whatever. They don't own the infrastructure. They only can be the servicer. Okay. So they service, they're the servicer, they're there for the upkeep, whatever. Why are we paying such high power bills when we own the infrastructure?
So could you argue, to play devil's advocate, that they've been elected to make decisions on our behalf so they don't have to ask us, or they don't have to get a vote? Or
Well, that's not a question of asking, because we have a right to, if we own the infrastructure and these guys are are charging us electricity fees for the servicing of that such infrastructure, why isn't our capital, because the Australian taxpayers is coughed up for the capital, why aren't we getting
The
a return? Why aren't that service provider giving us 30% return for using our infrastructure? Are they using it for free? And this is the whole point, and this is where you see all these big service providers donate money to the political parties so that then they can get in with a better election campaign. It's just this complete revolving door that keeps depriving people of their rights. And this is the failure. The reason why...
this is so much worse.
Well,
than
mate,
I thought.
I know this. Being a federal senator, I know this. That the whole reason why the Australian people elect 12 senators out of every state, and I think it used to be 2 out of the Northern Territory. It's 1 now, I think. But anyway, they go to Canberra. Their constitutional duty that we pay for in Canberra is to make sure that the laws of the state and the Commonwealth are absolutely held up at all times. It's got to be paramount. And the Senate are failing the people. The House of Reps is just the hot air where something comes in, they introduce the bill, they debate it, but at the end of the day, it's got to come up to the fact checker, which is myself, Jared Rennick, all these guys in the House of Review, apply it to the law. I mean, we're getting legislation passed in Western Australia that is in complete conflict to the Constitution of West Australia, 2.2 and 2.3, and that's how we shut down the Aboriginal Culture Heritage Act, because we were looking at losing the long drop in Australia and looking at losing our farming land, and we shut that down, and by getting into Booty was the Minister for Lands or something here. I don't know if he was the Minister for Lands. I can't remember what he was. But anyway, he threatened to sue me. But at the end of the day, we applied the law, tipped over one of his key advisors, applied the principle of indefeasibility, and they couldn't bring in the Aboriginal Culture Heritage Act, and that's why they had to apologise to the West Australian people. So
yeah, so what was... I was across it at the time briefly. I didn't know a lot about it. But what was the scenario there? Because it seemed really... it seemed like an overreach of the state and telling people what they could and couldn't do with their land, which we already see that anyway. You want to build something on your property, you've got to get shire approval and all these things. But these farmers were like, it looked like they couldn't even put fucking fence poles up.
Well, that's right, because if you go and you want to build a shed and you have to get planning and whatever, who's building the shed? You are. What these guys were saying, well, we don't care. Someone else is going to come and build the shed on your property. Well, no, you can't do that because it's my property. But what they were trying to say is, it's not your property. It actually goes back, to someone else claiming a right. But the point is, under law, they haven't legally registered the instrument, their right on the title. Yeah. So how can you come along if you haven't? And this is...
Is this the fear of not having the physical title at the state?
Exactly. And this is where the best way for anyone to come in and take over a country, people have to remember and look back in history. A nation falls on the lack of understanding, and I'm trying to give understanding back to people because we don't want to lose this great nation. I think it would be very hypocritical that our Anzacs fought for our rights that we live today, and we do, and we are losing them. There's no question that we should sit on our hands for future generations, be the generation that did nothing. That's not going to happen. So that's the ethos of Great Australian Party, and that's why we're punching hard. And I tell you, we're punching really hard and getting results, okay? And we're fighting... currently at the moment, I'm fighting the Australian Electoral Commission. I'm fighting, Section 92 of the Constitution, where they claim they couldn't bring people through the borders during COVID. I got multiple people back through to the western side of Australia because all these police were running out there. Here's a good question for you: if we're one self-governing colony. Right, because before we federated, and people have to understand, go back in history, look up federation. We were colonies. of a dominion, right? So we federated, we became a one self-governing colony. So our borders are all out to sea. Okay. So why were the state cops standing on Commonwealth jurisdiction? Because we own the roads as well. That's why we actually don't need a licence to you can license your vehicle, but because we own the road, well, we're actually the licensor. So we'll get to that. So why do we need a licence to drive up the road? Sure, you can charge the vehicle because that's an entity that, it wear and tear on the bitumen or whatever you want to. But for us, we got free travel through this country. Have a look at your inside of your passport.
Yeah.
So why were the police up saying that there was borders when in actual fact our borders are 12 mile out to sea? We don't have any internal borders. So when we questioned the police during that time, they couldn't stop us. But then they said you needed a G to G pass. No, that's a contract. I don't want to sign that. Mm-hmm. So we didn't sign it, or we conditionally filled out a hard copy, and then we got home.
Were there legal ways to get around what they were doing with regards to borders and lockdowns?
Absolutely. We have the right to free travel intercourse. So no Emergency Health Management Act of 2005, I think it is, can continue on to prevent and override Section 92 intercourse, free travel right across this great nation. So if we were to say Clive Palmer ran the case, people probably would have seen it as Section 92. I've actually got a Section 92 running in the High Court now, which I'm doing. But if you're a company or Clive Palmer, he can do his business in Queensland and still deal with the state, right? Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't have to come into the state of Western Australia. Mm-hmm. But when you're a Commonwealth national, that we all an Australian, you have the right to travel to see your loved ones, and this is what was happening. The premiers were preventing people from going to see their loved ones that were sick and dying in the hospital. And this is why I've done the Section 92 argument in the High Court, because they could never place a continual prohibition on the free right to travel. And during that COVID time, I actually campaigned, I did electoral campaign, and the police go, "Are you coming into the state of Western Australia?" See, into the state. I say, "No, officer, I'm coming to the western side of Australia." Oh, okay, through you go. See, into state, because basically they're saying, "Are you coming in?" No, I'm not coming in. I'm travelling through Australia.
So the use of language
absolutely. People got to understand.
Weaponised.
Yeah, absolutely. This is how they contract with you and then get you on your ignorance. Oh, it's all in the words. It's amazing. And look, I didn't know all of this until I became a senator and studied law at the highest level.
Fuck.
Yep.
So, I mean, because we've already seen...
I don't know if I studied that.
So we've seen with the I can't remember what they called it, but the COVID inquiry and the way we handled it as a nation, and we've seen that they came to the conclusion that our fundamental human rights were completely overlooked in regards to how they were going to handle that situation. And this seems like it wasn't just our human rights. It seems like the law was overlooked in regards to what they were
section,
doing.
I think, look, I mean, I haven't got it in front of me. I think it's 24A of the Constitution protects us no end. And this is what they don't... The law professors that the government's engaged, like Anne Tuomi, who's hung up the phone on me, I say, which constitution are you relying on? Is it the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900, which is a British act, or are you relying on Australia's constitution? And they just hang up the phone, because there's the word. Where's the Commonwealth? We are the Commonwealth. Commonwealth stands for the wealth of the commoner. We are the commoner.
So what's the difference? I didn't know there was a one or the other.
Well, one is the act that is the founding deeds of this great nation, and one is just basically a counterfeit. It's a copyright.
When was and this is the Australian one that you're in reference to?
It started off in 1953 off memory. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Gough Whitlam Labor has removed us from the Commonwealth because Labor stand for communism, and that's why to have communism you can't have rights. That's what they stand for, because people think that when you vote for Labor, you're voting for the one that protects the worker. No, have a look at how the old Labor Party was spelled. It was Labour. Now you got one there that's Labor. It's not the same. So they're not protecting the worker, but people think when they go to the ballot poll, they're voting for the Labor, but they're not. It's Labor. They've changed their name. That's why they bought in private banks. That's why they've gone and built a new Parliament House up on the hill, when our Commonwealth Parliament is the one that runs our founding deed, is the one that they call the Old Parliament House, but that's actually our true Parliament House. That has the reference to the monarchy, it has the reference to our crown, it has the Bill of Rights, it has everything that our Anzacs fought for. The one up the hill is just an administrative office. It's a bit like if you looked at the courts in Western Australia. Why are we conducting our courts outside the Supreme Court down in the gardens? Why are we now in all these corporate buildings? Because the whole place is out of jurisdiction. And that's what I spotted in 2016. We're a basket case, mate. We are seriously a basket case. And if the people of Australia do not wake up, you've lost your country. In actual fact, you've pretty much lost it now, because by going to digital titles, you have nothing to prove you own that property. And once you can't show that you own that property, or you could be there, where they say in fee simple, and they take out the word in and say fee simple, you're only a tenant. If you look at people's titles, it just says you're a tenant in common. That means you don't own your property, basically.
Does this mean, like, to put an example out there, they want to build a highway through where your property sits, they can just go, bugger it, where you don't have a choice?
Yeah, pretty much. Because I tell you how it works, okay? People have to understand this, okay? We are the power. We are the supreme power. We're the ones that have to go to vote to put in a new government. Okay, so we're the battery to the mobile phone.
Yeah, they work for us.
Okay, so let me tell you how this little works, right? We talked about the Aboriginal Heritage Act, which I was successful in doing, and let's talk about shipping sheep, okay? They've come out somehow and come up with keep the sheep.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm telling you, if we lose our live export, family farms are gone. If you look at net zero with what Bowen's doing, there will be no family farmers. The family farmer has to reduce his primary productive land by 30% by 2030. That's only 4 years up the road, right? No family farmer will survive in Western Australia by producing cropping land by 40%. The state government has purportedly passed, I might add, because when I was testing it while I was in Parliament, since 1986, there has been no lawful law passed in the state of Western Australia, because let's have a look at it like this. If you don't run this country under your founding deed, the Constitution, and Federation created this great nation to have states and territories, well, if you're not running under the UK Act, how can you call yourself the state of Western Australia? You can't, because it was only that act that made you the state of Western Australia. So let's just park that to one side, right?
Park it to one side. But
so basically, we're running as a quasi colony. Sorry.
Does that void anything that's been done?
Well, Section 2.2 and 2.3 of the state constitution, if it's not passed in Her Majesty's correct title, it's void.
All right, let's come back to that.
Yeah, okay. People need to understand this. Yeah. And what I'm not here, this is no conspiracy theory. Go look it up. I want people to have a look at 2.2 and 2.3 of the Constitution Act of 1889, I think, of Western Australia, because the Constitution's not affected by the states when we federated, okay? So let's get back to this shipping sheep. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, the narratives come out, keep the sheep. Okay, well, hang on a minute. The government's not getting rid of sheep. So that's the wrong message. What the message should be is keep shipping sheep. Now, I served a quo rento on Murray Watts. Now, I know Murray Watts well. He came into Parliament when I went in 2016. He was advisor for the Premier in Queensland, who's now become Anna Blight. He was one of her advisors. So Murray came in with Labor Party. So I know Murray very, very well. And essentially, Section 51(1) of the Constitution is commerce and trade. So it's a right. So we can do commerce and trade. So unless those sheep are diagnosed with an infectious disease, the government has no jurisdiction to stop the shipping. Okay? Because people have to understand that when a lamb is born, okay, so what we're doing is we're shipping wethers, right? So these are castrated rams, they become wethers. And so they drop on Crown land. They don't remove from the farm, so they're bred up. They go and get loaded on the farm. So the truck is coming, the B-double's coming. I mean, I've done shipping sheep. So they come onto the farm. We load the truck out of the sheep yards, and it goes on Commonwealth jurisdiction, because all roads are Commonwealth jurisdiction, okay? And that's where the states have to maintain it. But in Parliament, we've got to give money for the so that's why the police have to have a licence plate like yours to be on that road. So the police have to be licensed to be on the road. Otherwise, they'd run around with Commonwealth plates. They don't. They run around with state plates like you. They have to have the licence to drive on Commonwealth jurisdiction. See, people don't. And this is why we have the right to protest, and the police can't prohibit us because we own the Commonwealth's ours.
Yeah.
So many at times the cops have tried to have us walk up and say we're not doing it, and then all of a sudden you apply the law to the police officer and he goes, oh, okay, well, go your hardest. Thanks, mate. Anyway, so the truck goes up the Commonwealth Road, it goes to the port. That's Commonwealth. Okay, so it's not a state issue. So the state government can't get involved with live shipping. So when the farmers come down, because they're told to come down by the West Australian Farmers Federation and they're told to come down by pastorals and graziers, and you don't hear from them, and there's not a lot of members now because they're about as useless as tits on a bull, and they wouldn't, honestly, half these blokes wouldn't know which end of a sheep ate grass, and yet they're out there advocating at these meetings for the farmers. So this is how it works. So all of a sudden there's this thing with stopping sheep. Well, hang on. Then there's a big rally, a big meeting. So this is how it goes. So the government, this is what I said to Murray, mate, I'm awake to what you're doing. So Murray appoints an advisory committee. They put an advisory committee, unelected officials, to go out and contract with the farmers. It's not the government, because the government can't do it. So they put this advisory committee to bluff the farmers. So out they go.
And how are they bluffing the farmers? What are they
I'm
doing?
going to tell you how they bluffed it. So out goes this unelected official, a panel of advisory selected by the government.
Suits.
Yeah, so they're all there. Wouldn't know, like I said, got no idea of the industry.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden, they have this meeting at Muresk or Katanning and all that. So all the farmers come, and who talks? West Australian Farmers Federation, who are politically cloned. West Australian Farmers Federation, who are politically cloned. Then they get the ABC there. So what then this advisory committee, it starts contracting with what they call the farmers' peak bodies, because a lot of the farmers sit quiet and allow these guys to take over the forum, and the government contracts with them. So the peak bodies get up and they go, oh, yes, well, you know, we need more time. Hang on, we're altering the terms now. Yeah. We need more time. So there you go. You're accepting that they have the power to shut down your industry.
Which they don't.
Which they don't, but the farmers haven't said anything because they haven't said, well, show me where you can shut it down. The farmers keep quiet, and these blokes, and then they come out and say, look, we've negotiated with the peak bodies on behalf of the farmers, and of course they get the ABC TV there, so then they put it out into the public. So there's public notice that meeting occurred. Here it was. This is what was happening. Boom, goes the farmers' industry. But I went to former Senator Len Harris and former Senator Bob Day and said, would you sign a quo rento, which means against Murray Watts. A quo rento is show me your power that can apply that law to shut down a right of commerce and trade and override our founding deed. So they witnessed the quo rento. I served it on him at 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. By 9 o'clock Monday morning, he was removed as Agriculture Minister. So then, because he was caught out, okay, and had expressed it pretty well, he couldn't show how he could override Section 51(1), which is a right. So we've got to take that a bit further. So then what happens is they go and put another pawn on the chessboard to where you got to do the process again. So
is this all? This is very. It seems quite sinister, and it seems like it's pointing towards corporatising farming.
Yeah, no, Australia is going everything. Yeah, so this is not a. Look it up.
Yeah.
If you look at the 1990s, right, and I came through the wool industry, so have a look at this. Okay, let's start with the Australian Wheat Board. The Australian Wheat Board it's like having a farmer go to church every Sunday. The Australian Wheat Board was their body, an unincorporated statutory body. Okay, it was theirs. It was controlled by the government. So this is what I mean, unincorporated. We've got to look at unincorporated because all our government is corporatising everything where we don't get the benefit. So when we have an unincorporated body like the Australian Wheat Board, operated since 1935 right up to 1997, I think, just in that period of time, right? It was unblemished. Howard privatised it, and by... I think early 2000 it got itself embroiled with was a coal inquiry for the oil for food scandal, and pretty much the Australian Wheat Board fell to its demise. Now that took a big part of the protection of Australian farmers. Then go to the Australian wool. Let's have a look at our wool. We grow magnificent wool, meat producing sheep. Mm-hmm. Whitlam. We used to have the Australian Wool Commission. Okay, it was a statutory body. It was brilliant. And we were trading with the world. It was fantastic. And I think we had millions of sheep. Okay, so let's have a look at really what happened. So around 1971, the Australian Wool Commission was there. I think by 1973. Whitlam, Labor government, changed it to the Australian Wool Corporation. So, but all the farmers, they kept coming out the AWC, and the farmers were going, well, we've still got our Australian Wool Commission, but they hadn't twigged that it had gone to a corporation. Whitlam broke the industry because it was a corporation. He could bankrupt it. And I'll tell you how they did it. In the 1990s, John Kerr was the Agriculture Minister, and they were claiming that we had too many sheep in Australia. And what this minister did is he put made a bill to go out and have the sheep culled. It was called the Flock Reduction Scheme, and 20 million sheep were put to their slaughter in this country. And a lot of the young people don't realise this. And a lot of the industry fell away because they said we had to get rid of sheep. Now, I can remember as a young buck back then, a lot of farmers were getting counselling because they didn't want to murder their sheep. Farmers were running sheep in the back of a semi-trailer, pulling the tarp over it, gassing them to death. Those sheep were buried in pits all around the paddock. And I mean, when you went down the highway, it was like looking at something in World War I where all these sticks hocks were out of the ground. It was the most horrific time. In actual fact, I vomited at a place.
Yeah.
And it was in my maiden speech. It has traumatised me. I've never seen such animal cruelty in all my lifetime, and I hope I never ever witness it again. But that was the Labor. And Labor have continuously gone to completely have this whole country go to overseas influences, like through corporations, taking away the family farms. There will be, and This is a true statement. And if you look at what Barnaby Joyce, I mean, the farmers are out there voting for the Nationals. They're voting for the Nationals, and the Nationals support net zero. No family farmers by 2050. And Barnaby Joyce, out of his own words when I was in Parliament, and John Anderson, who was the Deputy Prime Minister for the Nationals, said, why do we need family farmers when less corporate farms can do the job? And yet all these farmers are rocking up voting for the Nationals.
It's, yeah, and look,
Australia can't be that... Australians can't be that naive, surely. They have to say, well, at some point, where do we actually, for the avoidance of doubt, let's test this. Let's listen to what Culleton is saying. Let's test it, because I'm testing it, and we're keeping the cops off farms now. And
Well, this is something that's really close to my heart, because a lot of my close friends, my best mates, they're sheep and wheat farmers, and I've been out and I've even done a day of mulesing. Is mulesing that's what it's called?
Yeah.
Like, I've been part of the thing. I wanted to see what it was like, and I'm not sure it's my cup of tea, but
keeps you fit.
But I see how much they care about their sheep. They care about their product. They've got to keep them healthy, keep them strong, and to take away that, and under this idea of like. They're trying to frame it, it seems, as this like protect the sheep, the animal rights with the live exports and whatnot. But if we start closing down these family farms who care about their product, who care about their animals, and then start moving towards corporatized factory farming where these sheep are put into fucking disgraceful, disgusting conditions, then we're just actually contributing to worse animal rights and taking away from the actual Australians who have made this country what it is.
Well, let me tell you, as a farmer, and we are the best environmentalists. We look after our island. I call it our little island, a bit like Irish. It's my island. And that is what our farms are. We got broadacre farms. We run them efficiently. We put sheep through so that we're less fire hazard, And look, mulesing practices, this has been going on for years. And look, these lambs, sure, they come in, they get the snip, but then they're clean. Yeah. They're clean. They're not susceptible to, or less susceptible to fly strike. If you were to have a look at a fly-blown sheep and how maggots will just slowly eat them away and poison them, that is seriously cruelty. And I mean, you would not want to be going around pretty much moving sideways with live bait feeding off you.
And this is what was said to me. I was like, this seems like a process that, like, fuck, do we need to do this? And he's like, well, if you've seen a fly-blown sheep, then you'd know that this is required and far more humane.
Absolutely.
Than what
we have flies in Australia.
They use painkillers. The process I was involved in, they were great. So
So look, it has improved, out of sight, and there is no question about that. But what we have is leave the farmers alone. Our farmers are doing a great job, but we've now got Bill Gates coming into Australia, right? We don't need him here. No. We got Andrew Forrest, who's now meddling in New World Order and wanting to bring wind turbine. They call it wind farms. It's not wind farms, it's wind factories. So they can come down and put wind turbines down over our beautiful landscape. They're plundering koalas, belting koalas over the head to put wind farms, getting them out. That is not what we want in Australia. And yet we've got these guys going into Parliament. I don't know why the Australian people keep putting in the majors, but they do. But you are killing your country. If you vote for the majors, you are continuing to kill the rights, and the foundation of this country. And it's time people took a correction and said, no, we're going to give someone else a go.
Was this this ship that got stuck out off the coast recently, that felt a little convenient at the time that I feel like they're trying to get people on side with this animal rights side of things.
Well, nothing's 100%. I could get in the car now after this studio and drive down the road and get bloody sidewiped by a car and knocked off. Well, nothing's 100%. If you looked at the percentages, and speaking from a farmer, when I put sheep to go for live sheep, right, those sheep are fit, they're correct score. In actual fact, they're overscore. So they're actually over-conditioned. So then when they go onto the ship, they've got plenty of fat score to weather that. Now, these guys, when you're drafting these sheep, when they're in that peak condition, you've got to be really careful on the drafting race because they jump and they hit you on the... I mean, they knocked my old man cold one day and I thought they'd killed him.
Yeah.
So these things jump. They're like a fit athlete.
Yeah.
They go onto the ship and they are well maintained on that ship. There is no question.
Yeah.
What people have to understand is that the countries that they go to don't have the facilities of chilling houses or whatever or abattoirs, and they get their sheep no different to a farmer, and they process that at the other end. To me, you know, I do believe we have to have an advisory body overseas. There's no question about that. We have seen some horrific with the cattle, you know, killing. There's nothing wrong with the government putting a watchdog overseas, and we can put in the security cameras and do whatever. There's nothing hard about that, but they don't want to fund that. They're happy to you know, say to the public, "Oh, it's all bad." But hang on a minute, what are you doing about it? How can we improve it? And they don't want to spend that money when really it's a viable industry. But let me get you this. Getting back to keep the sheep,
Their way of improving it seems to be hurting the Australian farmers that are providing it, the industry to begin with.
Sorry, I missed that one.
The way that they seem to be trying to improve it is by hurting the Australian
absolutely.
farmers and the family run.
But it's deliberate. They don't want small business.
No.
You know, who wants a small business? And like, if I gave you $2 million today, or someone won $2 million, do you think they'd go and start up a small business?
No.
Or do you think they'd pocket the money and say, I'll keep it?
But well, that's it. And then we got the quality of the meat, for example. You know, like in these factory farms, what they're feeding them, how they're raising them. Like I love the idea of the family-run, pasture-raised cattle that we see and grass-fed, and these sorts of things. We're taking that away if we're going down the factory farm. Like, the factory farming is the problem that we're trying to avoid, and we're steering straight into it.
Okay, let's have a look at Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
Now, Bill Gates
Never heard of him. Who's that?
Yeah. Bill Gates comes in here. He's raising this thing about cow flatulence, right? Ruminants. And I knew it wouldn't be too long before they start triggering sheep, because sheep are ruminant as well. But let's have a look at it in my view. Do you think domestic cattle and domestic sheep, goats, deer are the only ruminants on this planet? Do you think we might have giraffes, wildebeest, gazelles, all of it? But no. They can still, you know, do what they need to do. But let me. We have a seaweed or a seagrass, CSIRO have come up. If we were to turn around and reduce cow flatulence or ruminant flatulence, we can feed this seagrass in, because I've been a feed manufacturer off the farm processing feed, in a pellet or in the diet, that reduces it up to 93.7%. But why would you? Because flatulence from ruminants actually stimulates photosynthesis. It's actually a cycle to create good plant health growth. So why are you wanting to stop it? And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to put a retarder on good meat. They're turning around saying by 2050 you won't be eating red meat, you'll be eating insect meal. And that's come out all over the news. The protein will come from insect meal. Can you imagine? That's the end of the Aussie barbecue. Could you imagine asking your mates to come round and trying to shove a green apple in the mouth of a grasshopper and then hoping that you can have that little thing turn around and we all have a feed off it?
Yeah.
Why are we allowing these complete bloody lefties just run their ideologies? I can't pronounce it because I'm a bit tired.
Ideology.
Yeah, there you go. Because I'm actually under medication with a broken leg at the moment.
Yeah, I haven't mentioned that, but you came in on crutches, mate, so you're doing very well.
Yeah, I've taken some serious
Up those
medication.
stairs.
Yeah, so if I break out in a sweat, I apologise. But, you know, the ideologies to run our great nation. When common sense, what's happened to common sense? I mean, like I say, we have to. There's a point where we have to take a stand, and I just hope we can get Australians to do that.
I think doing things like this and making people aware that's great. The podcasts of the world, they're starting, and we see the influence it had on the US election, for example. But we're seeing it now. Even the PM, he's doing podcasts. He's doing fucking Abby Chatfield, so he's not reaching a new audience. That's not the case. But what I'm getting at is independent media is starting to rise. The bought out mainstream media is losing their viewers. It's losing the people who read their newspapers. So people are getting more of their information. So it's more podcasts like ours, and there's plenty of others around Australia that can focus on these sorts of issues. And I think that's what we need to see more of. And people like yourself getting in positions of power to at least raise awareness. I think that's super important. You said you were on the wheat board as well, which really interests me as well, because in regards to the health, I don't know if you're across this in the hybridisation of wheat and when that happened and the use of glyphosate. So I'm interested in those sorts of areas as well. What can be done in that sort of sense? Because obviously glyphosate is probably the most cost effective for our family-run farmers to grow the wheat, but it's, as far as I'm aware, having an impact on our health. I've seen some pretty troubling graphs lately on the rise of quite a large number of chronic illnesses and the amount of glyphosate we're using on our food, and then the rise seems to mirror and emulate the amount of chronic disease we're seeing in the world. So I'm interested in this because as I've been reached out to by certain farmers as well and saying, well, look, yes, we use glyphosate, but then it's lost throughout the process, or there's a measurement process to learn how much is still on the plant.
Residue.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
So
I think more residues come out of your S7s, like more in your orchard growing, where they are spraying insecticides, where glyphosate is more targeted to weed control. I mean, look, the bottom line is I've used glyphosate. If you didn't use good weed management practices, you couldn't feed the world population. It's all about yield, okay? Now, is there any residue left on the wheat? Perhaps yes, but perhaps we need to look at polishing the wheat. Has it gone right in? I mean, look, does that then hurt because that's an extra process. Does that hurt the family farmers, or is that something that could be subsidised by the government? No, I think that's more done. It's all
product?
done at the end user, not at the end. Before the end user is the customer buying it off the shelf.
Yeah, the sanitariums and whatnot.
But look, I think it's insurmountable by the time it gets to there.
Okay.
But there are better weed management practices. So I guess what the question would be, how do you stop the lesser use of chemicals? Well, then don't keep getting farmers to become bigger and bigger in corporate farms, because once you go to corporate farms...
You've got to compete.
Then you've got to use more chemical. If we were to keep more family farmers on their land... That's more farmers. You don't have to be as broad acre, so your management practices are a lot better. You're not having to do it all, And this is the other thing. Everything that a corporation does is for profit. So if they can use very high level insecticides or weed kill, herbicides or whatever, they'll use it because their bottom line is profit. Whereas a lot of family farmers, organic farmers is more where we perhaps need to go. I've got great friends that are organic farmers and they grow some magnificent crops.
Well, I've got a lot of, I've got a friend he's been considering it and he's been toying with that idea in his head, but obviously the cost effectiveness is a big issue. Your margins are so small already. Adding that extra cost value to providing a better quality product, healthier for the consumer. but at the cost of potentially their own farm. So this is where I was talking to him, and he suggested, like, obviously subsidies from the government are a good idea, because if we're prioritising the health of the consumer and our people that are taking in this wheat, that's obviously going to be shown and mirrored in the reduction in our healthcare system if we're not, struggling as much with our health and the side effects from having this wheat that's maybe tainted by some of this glyphosate. Potentially, that's something we can be looked into. But
Absolutely,
they don't. It seems like they just don't consider that what you're spending extra here could potentially save you money there. But that suggests to me that they're just really looking at corporatizing the profits, and it's it looks like industry, corporate and factory farms are being prioritised to.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look at it. Like, if you go back in ancient history, they didn't have chemicals, did they?
No.
They used conventional methods. So they used plough to plough the weeds in and whatever. And that's what a lot of the organic farmers do. So they don't use, spray. They use conventional methods. Pardon me. So what we have to do is bring back the co-ops, and we have to control Woolworths and Coles, because I can tell you right now, what a farmer gets at the farm gate, by the time, it's like they don't pay anything for sheep or $1 a sheep, but when you go to the supermarket, you're paying top dollar. So it's this corporation in middle, Coles, Woolworths and all that are ripping off the Australian people. So what we've got to do is bring back the co-ops, okay? I know IGA is an independent, but technically we need to come back to co-ops and family farm markets. You go to markets, you buy your organic wheat and so forth, and we need to also in Australia look at our natural bush tucker, allow the tribal people to bring all their bush tucker, because that is great. Look, the best medicine is the food that you eat. There's no, you can't dispute that. So what we have to do is but be able to come back to more conventional type farming, pull it up and say, look, and then have better markets to where that farmer can value add. So the end user customer, which is you and I going through the revolving door at Coles and Woolworths, we then have the opportunity to go to a co-op, which could be what's his name, the Spud Shed, got around the potato board.
Tony Gallardo,
Yeah, and good on him too. And basically, that's what we need to do. We don't need these. I mean, Coles and Woolworths are okay, but
the fact that there's a board for the potatoes is kind of makes me giggle. But
no, that's right. So look, if you looked at what the farm gate price is for a farmer to what the end user price is to the consumer, there's plenty fat there that can come back and help both parties. And this is what we're saying, all this can stop the pressure on the family as well. And this is a very important point. If people come back under their law and have their representatives and put them in the correct jurisdiction, we actually don't have to pay income tax, because income tax came in as a tax to service, I think it was World War II or World War I or the previous wars. If you go back through Helsbury's Law and all that, it's voluntary. We don't actually have to pay income tax. And people came up to me and said, you're nonsense with your policies with your party. You have to pay income tax. And I say, well, when did you last pay income tax? He said, well, I've always paid income tax. And I said, no, answer the question. When did you pay income tax? Well, I pay it every payday. I said, do you? Well, can you provide me the receipt where you pay it? No, I don't have a receipt. I said, well, then how are you saying you pay it? He said, I pay it. I said, but show me the receipt. He says, well, no, it gets taken out of my wages.
So it gets taken from me.
It gets taken. You're not paying it. They take it off you.
So
this is how they get
voluntarily?
No, this is how this separate jurisdiction gets around everything. You can say, well, okay, well, you're not paying it. They're taking it. That corporation's taking it off you.
The corporation being the state.
Yeah, the company. So it takes it off you. So that's how they get around the law.
And so then the company gives it...
Now you're getting onto it. And this is what we got to just tell people. We have a law.
Okay.
I don't care what happens. That's our law.
Yeah.
The police, no one's above the law. But you know what? If you have no law, well, how can you be above it?
So what about, like, for example, sole traders?
Well, we have to look at sole traders, right? So a sole trader can come to someone and that has an obligation to say, is personal income tax voluntary? And look up the law. And if they went and actually looked at it, it's not. There's another failure by the senators. These senators should be saying, there's the question goes into Parliament. Now do the research. And if you go and have a look at it, the Constitution says through the Helsby Laws of England, it's voluntary.
So explain to me why people go to jail. Like, how does this happen?
Well, people go to jail because they commit a crime.
So if they're avoiding tax and they pay a fine, or they go to jail, or is that something that happens?
Well, that may be through a corporation. That may be not through their personal side. But you could argue that. The point is, this is where it shouldn't be up to us to go back into an Australian jurisdiction that doesn't recognise the rights of our Commonwealth, because you're going into the Dracula who's in control of the blood bank. So what we got to do, it's the role of the senators that sit in the highest jurisdiction of this country to put it to the test. And when they put it to the test publicly, people will be very amazed.
So it was brought in to help fund the war.
Yeah, it was.
And
I don't know which war it was. It was either World War I or II.
But it was meant to be temporary, and it just stayed.
That's right. And then they just continue it on. Exactly. And if people don't sit back and say, well, hang on a minute, enough's enough. We've certainly well and truly paid for that.
Yeah.
That's it.
So surely, instead of paying income tax, we could tax these corporate mining conglomerates and gas giants.
Absolutely. All these people that are coming in overseas companies, that's what the Great Australia's, we're going to apply the proper tax rate to them.
Yeah.
And abolish personal tax. So then both people coming that working essentially bring in 60% more income, or save 60% more income through the front door.
Yeah.
How good's that?
So,
and then the pressure of everyday living is lifted. And look, I get onto these podcasts and I say, and the government's never shut me down. They've never put misinformation, all this disinformation nonsense against me, because I'm not making the claim here to your listeners. The law makes the claim. I'm telling you that the law makes this claim. It's not me. And that's it. So
let's say I decide I'm not going to pay my tax at the end of this year. How do I dispute this?
Well, what you could do is you could then say, well, okay, don't ever say I won't pay it. What you then do is you say, I'll pay it into a trust. The trust then writes to whoever it's got to go to, with the Australian Taxation Department, and say, if you can show us that you're bona fide creditor at law, the trustee will make the payment. And in actual fact, a few people have been doing that and doing very well.
I see. I might have to talk
so
to you
this
off
is,
air.
but, this is where it shouldn't get to that. We should just have the senators who we've elected to go and do it there. So there's no, we don't need the cost and people to be, having to go through all of it. That's what we pay these bloody senators to do, not just why should we have to do it?
Yeah.
That's what their role is.
Well, I see Trump's trying to abolish income tax in America.
Well, Trump's doing a good job because he's come back under their constitution and under their law. That's what Brexit did it. They did do it, but it's been tainted. But can I tell you this? Australia needs to Oz-exit as well. We need to come back under our founding law is where we got to go. And that's the good thing about Trump. He's bringing back the rights to the people. We need to get rid of privileges, because if you're only afforded privileges, you have to pay to go on the road. You have to do this, you have to do that. You have to basically pay for everything. And we shouldn't have to, because why are we paying when we own it? And can I tell you this? I went to Parliament House and I think it was a couple of thousand, this over the Aboriginal Heritage Act. And I went there the day before and I'm walking around and I'm live streaming. And anyway, I said, there's the police, because, I seem to attract the police pretty well when we're doing these property things. And I said, and there's the police. I said, we'll keep them under control. And this police officer said, no, mate, we'll keep you under control. I said, is that right? How's that? And he says, well, you'll have to have a license. You better have you got a license? Am I required to have one? Yep, you've got to have a license. If you don't have a license here for tomorrow, we'll be dealing with you. And I said, okay. Well, so does that mean I have to get approval from the licensor? And he stopped and he goes, well, yeah, I guess so. No, not I guess so. To get a license, I would have to be granted from the licensor, correct? He said, yes. I said, so that'd be from the proprietor, the owner, correct? He goes, yeah. Well, okay. Well, I've just consented. I'm the licensor because I own the parliament. I pay your wages and I pay all those galahs in the thing. So I'm the owner and I grant. And guess what? I had a whole campaign with no interference with the police and outside Parliament House. But when you go and apply for a licence, then you're consenting that Parliament's valid. And this is what's happened with this election. It's in default. So Shane Love comes out from the Nationals and goes, this whole election, the commissioner should stand down, blah, blah, blah. But then he says, yes, but we have to have a parliamentary inquiry. Straight away when the parliament sits, we have to... What's Shane Love telling to the Australian people? That the election's valid and because to have a parliamentary inquiry. But we're saying, how can there be a new parliament to have a parliamentary inquiry when it's in default? So this is how he tries to mislead the people. Now they're coming back and saying it's got to go to the ACCC or the CCC or whatever. Yeah. And now we're going to get McCusker. No. The election is in default. Now the correct process would be go to the Court of Disputed Returns, which I'm not sure whether someone's going to do, but I'm certainly not going to do it because I'd like to do it, but can't afford it. But that's the thing. So he comes out to bluff the people. People don't do anything. You've consented there's a lawful parliament. But no one can be deprived of voting. That's a right. I have a right to go to the ballot. I can't run out of ballot papers. That's not a true voting. That's just disgraceful.
Yeah.
But this is how it's got. This is how bad and rotten Australia's got. And yet the people go, well, what can we do about it? Well, start standing on your rights.
Well, it seems like a battle of rights versus privilege, doesn't it?
Well, you'll only ever have privileges while you're running under a corporate administration. And currently Australia is running on the wrong railway track. We're no longer the Commonwealth. We're running under the Australia Act. Well, when did people vote the founding deeds the United Kingdom Act? Yet we're all running under the Australia Act. Bob Hawke, Whitlam, Bob Hawke, all these guys, Keating, all of those guys are just completely eroded the rights of Australia. Now we're going to start losing our Australian farmers? What becomes of us then?
It does seem like we're a testing ground, Australia, for the world.
Well, Jeremy Lee was a great guy in the 1990s and he picked it up and there's actually a new map for Australia which has all these regions and people, that's no conspiracy theory. He was talking about that in the 1990s because Whitlam signed the Lima Agreement in 1973 or 5 and took all our manufacturing overseas. Do you know what our biggest manufacturer is in Australia today? Our biggest manufacturer?
Yeah.
Your local baker.
Really?
Yep. He's your biggest manufacturer. Bakes bread. We've lost Holden. All our manufacturing gets done overseas. Our baker is our biggest. Aren't we so proud to be Australian? Hey guys, come to Australia and meet our biggest manufacturer. It's our local baker.
And we see that's what Trump's doing. He's bringing manufacturing
absolutely,
back to America.
And that's what needs to come back. Why should we be reliant on another country? We've got we've got everything here to value add. But while we're not value adding, how can there be any revenue go back to the Australian people? Well, because we've allowed it to go offshore.
Well, it's because our government seems to be loyal to the resource industry, which seems to be loyal to China. Which is
have a look at your government, your major parties. Look at the kickbacks they're getting from the banks through donations, all these sort of things. You know, Malcolm, look, the citizenship saga, I created that. And I caught the High Court with its pants down. It was running out of jurisdiction. It was in my inaugural speech in Parliament, and then they came for me after that. Malcolm Turnbull stood down because he couldn't hold a bona fide Royal Commission because he wasn't the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia. So he's only the Prime Minister of the Australian government. So he doesn't actually hold an executive power to run a Royal Commission. That's why none of the bankers went to jail. It's all this. Originally, the Australian Capital Territory, the ACT, used to be the Australian Federal Territory, the AFT. It then became the ACT. What's that? It's just an act. So, you know, the whole thing is what the public is being shown. And if the public don't kick back on it, and there are a lot of people in Australia that are now starting to wake up, and they call it the freedom movement. But then, you know, what government comes out to people and calls them anti-vaxxers? That is disgraceful. What government comes out and says a sovereign citizen? Do you know what a sovereign citizen is? One that sits in Parliament claiming to be under the Crown and then is nationalised under the Citizenship Act.
Yeah.
That's a sovereign citizen. That's them there claiming to be sovereign when they're a citizen.
Yeah. Yeah, the government calling us anti-vaxxers and being the only country on the planet that withholds welfare payments for not taking a medical procedure, as in the no pay, no jab, no pay concept, just shows how much of a fucking police state we are. We are completely controlled. And you are right. We are living by privileges, not our rights.
Absolutely. And we've caught out now, we're going to be allowing a lot of farmers, and I'm going to make this statement, right? When you have a legal right, you register your legal right on your title. But if you only have an equitable right, then you have to go to a court to prove you have a legal right against that real property, right? They're the two choices you got. And we've canvassed that earlier. I can tell you with what I now know after applying legislative law, this is, you know, above the normal judiciary law, that the wrong instruments have been used to take land, to take real property by big law firms in Western Australia, if not Australia, right? There's no question about that. What it's done now is expose the West Australian Police coming out and getting involved in a civil matter on orders that have were actually granted for non-monetary judgments. Okay, this is a fact. I don't know when a bank wants to repossess a property. I wouldn't think they'd go to court to get a non-monetary judgment when the whole core business of a bank is to lend money and get it back, correct? So why would they support a non-monetary judgment? Well, whatever they may have done or may not have done after the GFC, there was a big clean out of farmers, 4,000 farmers, the top farmers in Australia that were in the landmark loan book. Now, I've been on 60 Minutes. Pauline Hanson saw me give evidence at Novotel Wentworth. I've gone in Senate inquiries. I've actually put up great submissions to senators and who were standing up for the banks and then had to lick their wounds after because I'd done all my homework and my ducks were in a row, where they can just come along and do things that leave people destitute. So we lost, there was 4,000, and it was proven at the Royal Commission that there were serious issues. You don't need to do that to people. You know, okay, if you don't honour your agreement, you don't have to, send in the toe cutters and be heavy and bring the police and get them to cable tie and slam you in the back of a paddy wagon when you're actually still the named proprietor of the property. What has happened is it's backfired. And I can tell you today, with my knowledge, that the land title registry system in Western Australia has severely and seriously been compromised. And under the Torrens title system, which is what we adopt for the accuracy and integrity of our land title system, which is paramount to us having rights on our private property. The Register of Titles in Western Australia has got a real train coming into station to whereby high legal firms, and I'm making this statement, they can take me to court and sue me because I want them to, because then I can provide the evidence and we can show that under the Torrens system, they have used instrument that voids everything. So what? They went to court and got a judgment. So what? That's not an issue for the court. What happened after that is the problem. Was proper due process followed? Well, they chose to go to that jurisdiction. They chose to get remedy in that jurisdiction. They chose to go and pretty much get these registered to stamp these default judgments, summary judgments like parking tickets, because we know, people lost faith in their own judiciary, and rightly so, because it's all out of jurisdiction. There's no protection under the Crown. I mean, this is all where the whole thing's completely eroding people's rights, because you have no rights when you go to court. You have to prove yourself innocent. Now, once upon a time, they had to prove you guilty, but now it's the opposite way around. And, of course, the cost of litigation. But what happened after that? Well, when you deal with real land, there has to be the correct instruments applied to it. And if you don't do it, it voids everything. Currently today, the information and the evidence that we have voids everything, and our current title system is in serious disarray, and it needs to be fixed. And the pressure now is coming on the Register of Titles, because they do have the power, and will be letting the Minister for Lands, because Terry Redmond was the Prime Minister for Lands, and all these farmers were contacting him saying, look, we're having our property stolen, we haven't had defaults, and of course the Royal Commission put them down as non-monetary defaults, and even the Commissioner Haynes said the banks choose to follow the law when they choose, when they feel it's right, and then they choose not to. He said that is unacceptable, and he actually issued, in part of his findings, a full inquiry into the landmark loan book. Well, let me tell you, that never happened, and I've done it. And now our title system, our registry under the Torrens title system, which must be accurate, because otherwise the state government becomes liable. It puts a fraud on title and a stain on Treasury, and Treasury has to have a clean bill of health before it can borrow money. We've got a problem. These legal guys have seriously compromised our land title system, and this train's coming into station. And you get your listeners or your viewers to go on a Great Australian Party and start watching these live streams, because I'll tell you what, they're going to start learning something.
Wow. I guess before we sort of finish up, what can we do? Is it we just trust blindly that you're going to be able to make an impact, or is there...
No, I've already made an impact, and if you look at our policies, and look, I'm not here to get your voters to vote for me. It would be good, it would be great, it would be fantastic. We have William Bay, who took on APRA. He's a very highly qualified practitioner, a doctor that I would put my trust in. We have Paul Oosterhouse, who's an amazing practitioner who is supporting William Bay. We have Rob Fazzino in Victoria. Rob Fazzino was actually the producer of Hey Hey It's Saturday. A lot of people would have remembered that fantastic show, and he's come forward and he's doing a lot of our video work and so forth. Obviously, you've got myself and William Newton Wordsworth here in Western Australia, and we've got Dawn Kelly who's running for the lower house. And, we've got 4 in the team, 3 in the Senate, 1 in the lower house, because that's all we can afford. So, but you don't have to win government. You just have to get the balance of power in the Senate, which Pauline Hanson had, and she turned her back on the Royal Commission, and she wouldn't deal with the jurisdiction that I was raising, and she's a rusted on Liberal, and that's not being disrespectful to that. And Malcolm and I know Malcolm very well, and, Malcolm used to come to me for a lot of constitutional advice, and I was very happy to give it to him in Parliament, but I've not heard from him since the day they forced me to go independent. So I at the time, in retrospect, I didn't go away from the One Nation values, although I didn't accept her stance on Muslims. I think we have to respect everyone that comes to the, we've got to obviously get our immigration under control. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
But we have to respect people, respect people's religion, and all live in a beautiful union and a community. So I didn't accept that totally, but everything else I was pretty on. I took those values through because that was my commitment at the campaign under One Nation. So I didn't want to let the people down. But pretty much we've got great policies, and these are going to help the everyday Joe Blow Australian and not our overseas companies. And that's what we need to do. Come back to the grassroots of what we are as a nation. And at no stage in 1948 did we ever consent to becoming a citizen and not be and be removed as a subject. And the citizen takes us away from our rights. And this is what these people in Parliament have done. They've usurped the powers of the people when they could not. And we have to stand above the Parliament. And the current administration, we're below. We're subservient to an administration, and we have to understand what our law provides us, what our rights are, and get above the Parliament and start running our country. Make it like Trump says, make it great again.
Yeah.
We ain't going to make it great when you're living downstairs and everyone keeps tipping the dishwater water on you and disrespecting you. Get above the pack is where you need to be to get the ball.
Mate, it's that's a very important episode, I think. Definitely, even like I like to think I'm across a fair few things, and then some of the things I've learned today have been pretty eye-opening. So certainly something I'm going to look into further. A few little things, and look, mate, when it comes to people getting votes and who's in power, I can see how people get the tap on the shoulder and fall in line. It's I don't want to say depressing part of that, but sometimes you align with someone, think they're going to be doing the right jobs, and then they have to fall in line just to stay alive in their position, But
that's not honest representation. Then
I
is
know.
it?
So
and I didn't do that. I was prepared to take the bullets.
And it seems and this is something I spoke to a mate recently who he comes on the pod a fair bit, and when we had Rennick on, we heard the politician, and he wanted to hear the person, and I think we've heard a lot of the person today. So that's really good, and I really appreciate your time today and your honesty and your openness. So thanks so much for joining us, mate. Anything you want to plug before we finish up?
Look, I've come out with a documentary. I was talking about Rob Fazzino, who was the producer of Hey Hey It's Saturday. He's done a documentary on this. It's coming out the next couple of days, and I urge people to watch it. And look, I'm not here to have people vote for me. I'd like them to, but this is I consider this podcast apolitical. Okay, but have a look at the documentary, and it sums it all up. I cannot express it or explain it in layman terms any better, and I don't expect people to understand the high levels of law because often I don't understand it, and I have to really dive into it. And there's always this little phase unless the contrary intentions appear, and then you got to go down this rabbit hole. I mean, they've sort of made this whole cluster web of just law should be just very clean. You should just, and it shouldn't cost anyway. So I've made it very, very simplistic. I've really done it from the heart. There's no bullshit. It's your country boy just giving a message to your Australian people. And to be honest, if people aren't going to then take action and take control, I'm certainly not going to push a car with flat tyres, and I'm certainly not going to do it while there's a crowbar jammed in the top of the gearbox. So I'm just a fool. So let's see where that goes, and then we'll go from there. But look, thanks for the opportunity of inviting me onto your podcast. I've enjoyed it. Without a glass of water, I did pretty well.
Mate, I was going to ask you before if you needed one.
No, it's a couple of coughs there, but I just had to adjust the choke to keep going. And I got it going. I got the butterfly opening, and away we went. So,
mate, bloody good episode. And just before we do finish up, I just want to give a shout out. Maybe a few people who are listening will know who this is. A guy named Sean King past player of West Perth Footy Club and down at Wanneroo District Cricket Club, passed away the other day. Fucking absolute legend of a human. He was the runner for our footy club after he retired for so long, for almost, I'd say the whole time I was at West Perth Footy Club, which was 11 years. So he's still around now. Well, not anymore, but he was still around, like even last season, helping out where he could, come upstairs and have a beer and watch the games. And yeah, mate, rest in peace. And we'll have a beer for you this Saturday at first home game at the club. So rest in peace, mate. And thanks for joining us.
Our condolences. Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.